Thomas the Tank Engine, a childhood icon loved by many and feared by the rest. No matter where you stand on him, you can't deny it was a bit of a weird franchise.
I like children.
Trains on their own already have this strange allure to autistic people, so when you start giving them faces, it's guaranteed to attract a bit of an odd following. I might even go as far to say that Thomas and Friends has one of the weirdest fandoms out there. It's not rabid like some other infamous examples, it's just interesting. It's also something that almost no one has gone down the rabbit hole on. As someone who grew up watching the show, I've stumbled down this hole myself, and I want to use this video to talk about some of the oddities that lie within. Now, before we get into the thick of things, I have to say that there isn't anything bad with most of the people I'll be talking about. From what I can tell, their obsession with Thomas the Tank Engine is harmless, and I'm not trying to attack any of them. I simply think that some of the stuff they put onto the internet is eccentric, so I wanted to share. Gay little disclaimer aside, let's see just how eccentric the Thomas and Friends fandom can get. There are a few sides to the fanbase online, but I'll mostly be talking about those on YouTube. The most normal of which are the reviewers. These guys simply talk about and critique the show. The only interesting thing about them is that they're adults discussing a TV series made for kindergartners. But like I said before, there's nothing intrinsically wrong about that. I only bring them up to establish a baseline of normality. Not everyone in the fandom is that weird, and this serves as a good juxtaposition for the ones that are. Speaking of which, let's talk about our first really kooky part of the fandom, an informal group that I like to call the OC creators. These guys basically make fan fiction with Thomas toys in lieu of models. I'll ease you all into this subject with Diesel D199 and his Tomica Thomas and Friends shorts. He basically does these little comedy sketches with the engines as characters, and honestly, they aren't bad at all. I'm rewatching some of these and finding myself genuinely entertained. The production quality is surprisingly good, and there's some funny material in here. Though I will admit a lot of the jokes just rely on the fact that the typically friendly cast of trains are swearing and making crude remarks. Also, Edward rapes Thomas in episode 15. Did I mention that this is one of the most normal pieces of Thomas fan content? Surprisingly, this brand of edgy Thomas parody isn't just limited to Diesel D199. There's also Busted Buffers with his Twisted Tom series. He's made such classics like Thomas Gets Turned, where Thomas uses weed as fuel instead of coal, and James says this:
I sent the Jews to the concentration camps. I was the Auschwitz train.
Needless to say, these guys offer only the most highbrow brand of comedy. But offensive parodies of kids' shows really aren't that special. There are also people who make skits that are more akin to the actual source material, one of the most popular being Rama Fool. Looking at his videos, they really aren't that interesting. It's basically just a dude playing with his toys and messing around in a video editing software. What is interesting is there's another YouTuber who just straight up copies his videos verbatim. It's one thing if he was just imitating his style, but it's a whole other thing to unironically, with no discernible reason, make an almost beat-for-beat remake of another person's video. I really can't think of any other time I've seen something like this done, and I can't for the life of me figure out why he does it. The only motivation I can figure is that Madelone Farms really likes Rama Fool's Trackmaster Thomas videos. So, by now you're probably thinking that none of this has been laughably bad yet, but I think our next character might turn a few heads.
He's Phineas and Ferb's best friend, you know. All of the others will tell you so. He helps Phineas and Ferb whatever they wanna do today. He's a friend to all of us we adore. He's the best. He's the best. He's a friend to all of us that we adore. He's the best. He's Phineas and Ferb's best friend, Train Boy 54.
This is, if you didn't already guess, Train Boy 54, and he's probably the most infamous person in the entire Thomas and Friends community. Does anyone else have this problem where all YouTube content feels the same nowadays? Well, luckily, there's a single bastion of creative integrity left on this wasteland of pseudo-corporate schlock, and that is Trainboy54. A lot of YouTubers these days are afraid to be unequivocally themselves and upload content they're passionate about, but not Trainboy. If you couldn't tell from the clip I showed you, Mr. 54 has two big interests, Thomas the Tank Engine and Phineas and Ferb. One day, in a stroke of genius, he decided to combine the two, and the landscape of content on YouTube was changed forever. However, the truly incredible thing about this feat is how young he was at the time. Michelangelo was only 26 when he sculpted David. Alexander the Great was only 22 when he conquered Persia. And John McDowell was only 19 when he created Tommy Trackmaster TNF Season 1 Episode 4, Thomas vs. Ferb. He even won an award for Best Leading Actor at the 2014 Lorgon Studio Awards. Actually, the timeline for his videos is a bit confusing since most of his content got deleted in 2015 along with his original channel. The reason for the deletion was because the corporate hacks at Disney like to squash originality in the industry, but I won't stand for their tyranny, so let's take a look at some of the brilliant media they're trying to hide from us.
How about a game of hide and seek?
Who said that?
I did!
Hey! I know you! You're Irving! How long have you been sitting there?
A couple hours. My horoscope says I'm a background type.
Trainboy54 isn't one to go down without a fight. Despite the many unjust copyright strikes against him, he continues to make the quality content we admire him for to this day. Okay, but on a more serious note, other fans of Thomas unironically hold one part of his videos to a high regard, and that's his custom trains. At first this might seem ridiculous, but to play devil's advocate for a moment, I can kinda see where they're coming from when your typical custom engine looks like this, and your average original character looks like this. Well, I think that about ends our segment on the OC creators, and what original content it was. Now I want to move on to some creations a lot less original. One trend that's popular in the Thomas community is episode recreations. People will use their own toys, models, and sets to recreate their favorite episodes from the show. It's a harmless act, and I can sort of see how it'd be fun to do. However, I guess some people aren't satisfied with the episodes as they are, and want to make some slight changes to them. What do I mean by this? Just have a look.
Duck and Twilight were sadly heading to Wellsworth to help Edward and Applejack.
It's not fair, I tell you. Geezer Trixie has been telling lies about me and made so Tom Hat and the other engines and ponies think I'm a horrid engine.
But Edward and AJ just smiled.
Yeah, it's like what Granny Smith once told me. If you wait long enough, good things will come to you.
Yes, that's literally just an episode from the show, except with My Little Pony characters shoehorned into them. And I shudder to think how many hours of this man's life were sacrificed in order to make this. Hell, even just a few is enough to make me concerned. What's even more concerning is that this isn't a one-off phenomenon. There's two other guys who do practically the exact same thing, except instead of ponies, it's themselves.
At last, we lost patience.
What's the matter with you, James?
Yeah, why are you so red?
I am a splendid engine, answered James.
What makes this even crazier is that this series went on for almost 10 years. That's about a decade of commitment to, well, this.
The coaches will be waiting and the passengers will get cross.
That's rubbish, Percy.
Sam does have a point, Percy. It's still a little bit early. I mean, any good impatient engine seems to have a little bit of conflict.
Unfortunately for their fans, and luckily for everyone not in a straitjacket, Ackley Attack finally put an end to the madness last year. But he still makes very consistent uploads about other stuff. I could talk about some of that, but none of it will ever live up to Thomas's adventures with Sam the Thomas Fan 1 and Ackley Attack 4427. Oh, what the hell. I gotta mention this one where the actual video is 15 seconds long, and the rest of the 3 minutes is spent plugging every link in the description. Now that I've shared that bit of autism with you all, I think it's time to take a plunge into the final and most disturbed part of the Thomas and Friends community. Welcome to a crevice of the fandom much more twisted than anything I've shown you up to this point. This is the darkest pit of the Thomas the Tank Engine rabbit hole, and I'll start us off easy with something that I unironically enjoy, a little film called Shed 17. It's actually fairly popular with just over 2 million views, but still isn't what I'd call a mainstream hit. Shed 17 is basically a sci-fi horror interpretation on the concept of, what if Thomas the Tank Engine was based on true events? I'm sure everyone has thought at one point that these trains with faces would be a little freaky in real life. Paul's Films takes this idea to its most horrific conclusion in Shed 17. I highly recommend you guys just check it out on your own because I'm not putting it here to poke fun at like some of the other stuff I've been showcasing. I genuinely think it's a very neat piece of fan fiction, and the most funny thing about it is that in Paul's Thomas canon, the engines were made by an ex-Nazi scientist. So now that we've talked about an edgy Thomas fanfiction done right, let me show you one done wrong. Sodor Fallout is a series on YouTube delving into the concept of, what if the island of Sodor became a nuclear wasteland? Alright, so how's this any worse than Shed 17? Sure, it seems a bit cliche, but horrifically mutated trains with faces sounds like it could work. Well, first off, the show is blatant renewable energy propaganda. A nuclear power plant can't cause an explosion as seen in the show, and both bodily and environmental damage caused by them is actually some of the lowest amongst all other sources of energy. Okay, actually, all of that is irrelevant. I just wanted to advocate for nuclear power. The real reason the show doesn't work is because it takes itself so goddamn seriously and doesn't do anything amazing to justify it. It literally has the most basic and stereotypical premises you can think of for a sci-fi horror show set in a nuclear wasteland. Train has third eye. Train has melted face. Train goes feral. The most inventive thing they do is have Toby kill himself by slamming his face into a crane. Now that was pretty dope. The only other positive is the editing. It's rough in the first few episodes, but after the creator got more experience under his belt, the visual effects become decently impressive. Better than I could do, at least. Okay, I just found this while browsing YouTube recommendations, but apparently there's a knockoff version of Sodor Fallout which has over 400,000 views. Damn, that's about the same as the original. So surely if it's just as popular, it must be just as great. Let's check it out.
Edward gave the mutated Thomas some of his water. Thomas felt a little better after the drink, but was still very sick. He then said, "Thank you," before going silent again. The water seems to improve Thomas's speech. This gave Edward an idea. What if water is the key to defeating this? Now, Edward, you really don't think water would work? Pure, clean water might. And soap. Lots and lots of soap. Edward, there are thousands, maybe even millions of engines in the world. How are we supposed to get it to all of them? If we mix some of the water with cleaning supplies, we might be able to kill off the radiation.
Yeah, that's about on par with what I expected. Anyway, that's pretty much all I had to say about Sodor Fallout. It's goofy, but pretends to be some real hardcore shit. Now watch this completely unedited clip from one of its most recent episodes. Our next entry takes itself a bit less seriously, I think. Five Nights at Smudger's is exactly what it sounds like, but I probably have to explain why they chose an obscure character like Smudger instead of the #1 Blue Engine himself. Basically, Smudger's one and only appearance in Thomas the Tank Engine comes from an episode where he gets turned into a generator for causing trouble on the railway. It's kind of fucked up, so I get why they chose him as the main character for a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game. Really, there's not that much to talk about here. I just find it funny how there's a FNAF fan game for the most niche shit. It's also to showcase a bit of the weird Thomas fandom outside of YouTube, since that's the sector I've mostly been focusing on. Our last topic also falls into this category. It's a Thomas the Tank Engine creepypasta by the name of The Untold Story of Timothy. And here's the gist of it. There's a silver engine named Timothy, and he has the number 0. One night, he's taking passengers like normal, but all of a sudden, he started charging towards an under-construction bridge, while his expression had a, quote, very scary but angry, evil and aggressive look, and his eyes were black with tiny red eyes with zombie-like teeth, end quote. His intentions were then made very clear as he yelled his now signature catchphrase, "I'm gonna send you all to the graveyard!" Short story even shorter, Timothy drove off the bridge, killed all his passengers, and now haunts the area. This is one of the most popular fan creations in the entire Thomas community, by the way. Something that would be considered bland creepypasta schlock by any outsider is more popular and influential than you or I will ever be. There's plenty of other Timothy content that I could make fun of, but just look at this fandom post and you'll get the picture. Moving on. Actually, never mind, you have to watch this video too. It's totally key to understanding my point, and definitely not something I just wanted to throw in here for shits and giggles.
Hi. Okay, fine.
Sounds like you've got lungs.
What kind of a princess are you?
Do you have magic hair? Magic hands? Do animals talk to you? Were you poisoned? Cursed? Kidnapped or enslaved?
I am an E2.
Wait, what?
An E2.
I'm gonna send you all to the graveyard.
Now that we've watched that masterclass of cinema, we can put a bow on this journey down to the wondrous world that Thomas the Tank Engine fans call home. There's a lot about this fandom that I didn't cover, but I don't have all day, and if you're really bored, you can discover the oddities I left out on your own time. With that said, what did we learn today? That autism is a hell of a drug, especially when trains are involved. Good night, friends. I'll see you all whenever the fuck I next feel like it.
That's right, I'm officially announcing my very own community, or you could say, a direct rival to the Thomas fandom. While the Thomas fandom can produce great content but can be absolutely unfair to everyone by means of social media, just like how Democrats would be, we as Republicans look for the good in everyone and defend our individual rights for people who have been heavily mistreated. And, as a famous Republican would say, we too can make Thomas great again, and we have some promises when you join our community. No more being made fun of from someone who is technically more popular than you. No more needing to ask permission for anything we create. No more being misjudged on the way people see you as a person. Finally, and most importantly, the only two emotions